choices that I made.
Hello, and welcome to a conversation about touring. This is sponsored by the Lubbock Cultural Arts Foundation. My name is Roger Landis. I'm a lecturer at the Texas Tech University School of Music. I'm also Associate Director of the Vernacular Music Center. Our guests here today are Jenni Dale-Lord and Scott Faris, and welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Roger.
So, you want to just introduce yourselves real quick?
Me first, okay. It's because I'm in the middle, right? So, my name is Jenni Dale-Lord. I am a musician based out of Lubbock, singer-songwriter, tour as much as possible. So I'm really glad to be here today and share with you the lack of knowledge that I have attained over the years.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And my name is Scott Faris. I'm a record producer now by trade, but I did spend, 15, 20 years on the road touring with bands, and I'm connected with a lot of bands that are out touring now. So those are all, kind of my buddies and stuff. So I kind of try to stay up on what's happening.
So just so you know, I had my first tour in 1988, and I kept that up through about 1999. Not on the road full time, but on the road a lot. So I know of which you speak, but it was in the 1900s.
Well, we were both around in the 1900s.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I started touring pretty close to that same time period.
Yeah, Scott and I were actually in a rock band together in 1999.
1999. Yes, we were.
Cool. What was it called?
Ear Candy.
Oh, that's a great name.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you know, for musicians who are just getting started, maybe they've been playing locally and they want to get out on the road because, the road goes ever on, right? What advice would you give them to know whether or not they're ready to do that?
You want me to start that one?
Of course I do.
I'll be honest with you. There's no hard line as to, hey, it's time for you to start touring. In the natural course of being a musician, you find a time when you want to take your music further than your local community. And so when you get to that point where you're feeling that way, it's probably time to test the waters. I think, there's no set time period, but I think if you're going to expand your audience, you've got to get on the road. It's how you're going to meet people. It's going to be how you introduce your music to the world.
I agree, but I would also like to add that make sure that you are capable, right? You don't want to be just starting off and not have a stage presence and not really be able to play guitar very well and not be able to sing on pitch. So you want to hone your craft at home, because I think that people that at home are going to be more forgiving because they're watching how you start, they're watching your growth, they're doing all that stuff. So make sure you're technically capable of being able to perform before you step out on the road, I would say. But yes, ultimately it's just when you're ready to branch out and your gut says it's time.
Okay. And we're all here in this amazing community of musicians here in Lubbock and in West Texas. I'm guessing that as two seasoned professionals, you two, and particularly you, Scott, because of your job in production and engineering, I'm betting that you have been called on by young peers who want your advice about whether or not they're ready. Have you been in that position?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, a lot.
Yes.
So would your advice be, if you're a young musician, reach out to the elders or the more experienced people in your community and just ask them, am I ready?
Absolutely. And I think that's also feedback that you will get as you're performing. You're going to have fellow musicians show up, and you're going to have people who are your fans. And I think ultimately if we're all honest with ourselves, we know where our skill level is at and if we're ready to make that step. And so even though ego is a huge part of being a musician, I think a bigger part is not having an ego as well. And I think that's going to take you a lot farther.
I agree 100%. I think you should ask as many questions as you can. You should get to know everyone in your local scene. As a matter of fact, I always kind of call it owning your hometown. You need to be one of the artists in your hometown that really has a following. You need to cultivate that audience, and that sounds like, a terrible word, but what I really mean is you need to befriend people. Mm-hmm. You need to play. You need to, and get to know your audience. Don't just be somebody on stage acting like you're too cool for everything.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, the more friends you make and the more relationships you have, the better you'll be able to go out and do a tour. We talk all the time that if not for friends I've made along the way, I wouldn't be able to accomplish a lot of the things that I've been able to accomplish.
I remember that in my career, my performance career, part of that vetting was the experience of making a commercially released record. You know, there's no substitute for the first time you're in a studio and wearing headphones and hearing you're playing under a microscope. And in your experience, has that happened as kind of a way of vetting artists for the studio? And if you have anything else to say about the relationship between recording and then touring.
I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, they're absolutely related. First off, if you're, one of the reasons you want to tour is because you want to spread your music. If all you're doing is cover songs, which there's nothing wrong with, you can tour with that and be very, very entertaining. But if you have original music, you want it to grow beyond your home base. And so just to be able to really get it out there, you're going to have to do that. And I find, back to your other question, one thing as far as knowing when is a lot of times you'll have somebody at a show that'll come up and go, "Oh, I'm from Dallas. Do you ever play over there?"
Yeah.
When you start hearing things like that,
people will let you know.
people will let you know, "Hey, that was pretty good. You should probably come play here." You know what I mean? But yes, having a viable recording, as a minimum an EP that you're out supporting, because you have to have that to send to venues. I mean, I'm sure you've done that. You send your music to everywhere you go.
Absolutely. I remember when I was at South Plains College, we had to make press kits, right? We don't have press kits anymore. We have electronic press kits, and everything's done online. And even still, yes, if I'm trying to reach out to a venue that's never heard me before, or trying to get onto a bill, they will request an electronic press kit, and having some physical music for them to listen to is absolutely needed. Like, even I saw a post from a radio DJ friend of mine who said, "Stop sending me YouTube links. I want an MP3 or a WAV file. I need actual music." So you have to have that recorded music more than just a iPhone video from somebody at your show or something like that.
That was my next question. How important is it to have live video if you're going to put together a tour?
I'm anti-live video, but you got me here today to be recorded, and that's saying something.
I actually think it can be really important, but it doesn't supersede having a record.
Right.
Having a recording out there, a professional level recording, we're in the business of music. And yeah, I do recognize we now live in the age of TikTok, and that's wonderful. But I want to hear you. And so I think that that's really, really important. I do think that when you do reach a certain level, having live video out there can be great, because you can go, "Here's us live." And, but it's a stair-stepped approach.
Sure, and there are like really big artists that say don't bring your cell phones into the room. That's ultimately what I would like to be. I mean, what was it, that Jack White show that you went to?
I loved it.
And he was like, "Drop your cell phones at the door. Do not do that."
Yeah.
And so I'm not anti-live video, but for me, I don't want to be doing Facebook live streams for every single show. I want you to come to a show.
Yeah.
I want you to have that moment with me. And so anti was a strong word, but I think the phone and the live video is used too much, in my opinion.
I think you're right. And
But I'm old. I'm senior.
You ain't that old,
I
girl.
may have you be both feet.
I actually do think, too, there is a resurgence of live music right now, because we all just came out of a pandemic where we couldn't go anywhere. And I'll tell you, I don't really want to see anybody perform on Zoom ever again. I don't care. I want to see the real thing. So, yeah.
I remember back when smartphones came on, one of my favorite artists, Pat Metheny, in an interview, he said, live music has changed because every night is a world premiere.
That's
and
right.
Every artist has to live with that, because it's going to live in the record. Whether you let people do it or not, they're going to do it. Yeah. And I thought that I felt a little discouraged by that. An artist at that level was thinking that his livelihood had been changed by technology to that extent. But
Well, and you have to be perfect every time.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to be human anymore, because somebody is going to document that, and it adds a whole extra level of pressure, which is why
anxiety.
Why to circle back? That's what I'm saying. Before you go tour, where they're going to judge you even more harshly than your your hometown would, make sure that you're ready to do it.
Well, if I can offer this as a historian, it's not the first time this has happened. Schoenberg said around the turn of the century, well, I think he was referring to early recording, so maybe the 20s, late teens. He said we stopped playing music and we started performing it. And it was because there was always the possibility of it being recorded, or that you will be judged in your performance against a recorded virtuoso. And so that had a chilling effect. In Ireland, people stopped playing when they heard the great records made in America of Irish traditional music. But they got over it. And I think we'll get through this. But it's a period of adjustment, don't you think?
100%. Yeah, I think it's actually, and Pat Metheny, I've heard that same thing. He mentioned also that every night's opening night. I mean, it's just, and it's you don't get the chance to develop.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be perfect from moment one. And while I thought I was as a young man, there might have been a little bit of arrogance in the middle of that. Reality smacked me in the face pretty quickly that I wasn't all that in a bag of chips. I had to actually work to get decent.
Absolutely. We mentioned making records, and I think about the very first album I made back in 2006. I won't even play it to save my life today, nor the one I did at Texas Tech in 2012. Like, if it didn't come out after 2016, I'm like, don't get that around me. I have nothing to do with it. So, as a musician, you want to grow and develop. If you're never getting better, you're not doing it right.
It's just your musical skeletons aren't in the closet anymore. They're on YouTube.
Yeah. And YouTube or something like it is forever.
That's right.
So before we get into kind of the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of actually playing shows and going from show to show, a couple of other questions about putting a tour together. Do you need an agent?
I do not have an agent, and I tour a lot. I think one thing that the internet has been good about is allowing you to make these connections and contacts that you wouldn't been able to have made in the past. So I reach out to whoever and hope that they get back to me. So I would love an agent. So if anybody knows one, but I do not have an agent, no.
Yeah, and I think, the internet has helped democratize that. And the agent is one of those things that's, it's kind of the $1 million question. If you get a great booking agent, it can make you. If you get a bad booking agent, it will break you. Not can, will. And so I think that's really difficult because it's always a cart before the horse thing. You have to be making a certain amount of money before an agent is interested in you, okay? But how do you get to that level without without the help of somebody? And, I think Jenni's a great example of somebody who just is a force of nature because you work your butt off. I'm taming my language just the tiniest bit there, but you work your butt off on that and you make it happen. And it's absolutely possible nowadays to do that. So I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
What about routing, whether you have an agent or you're booking it yourself? I would argue, Jenni, that you have an agent. It's you.
Yes,
It's correct.
Somebody's gonna do
I
that
wear all
work,
the hats,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So how do you think about routing?
So for me, I kind of have an ultimate destination. Like I just came back from playing a really great show in Nebraska. Well, I'm not going to drive 13 hours to Nebraska, so I'm going to try to break that up. So I booked the one show, the ultimate destination, and try to fill in the gaps between there. So as long as I have the direction that I want to go for the thing I'm needing to, you reach out to things like the Kansas State Fair, which is where we played, and we had such a great time, and just little things like that along the way. So when I'm planning something, it's like, oh, we want to tour Massachusetts. How are we going to do that? So we're going to make our way around there and do that. We want to go to Oregon. All right, let's do it up that way. So instead of starting step by step and seeing where I end up, I start at the end and fill in the middle.
So does it start with an anchor gig?
It does.
That
for
kind of
me.
makes it worth,
Yes.
and then you fill in.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I was going to say is that we always talked about it being an anchor gig. It's a gig that, hey, we're actually going to make a little bit of money on this gig. It'll pay for two of the gigs that will make nothing practically on the way there. We'll have hotels there. It'll help. And usually that anchor gig comes because of somebody in your circle of friends, I hate the word networking, but in your network of people that you know, a lot of those anchor gigs come because somebody lived in Lubbock and, moved to South Carolina. We had that happen and invited us to play in South Carolina. So then it was the exact same thing. Hey, where can we play? Let's play. Well, we got a friend in Dallas. We can play there and crash on his couch. We'll talk about couch surfing
Yes.
here, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And then, okay, great. Is there a spot in Louisiana we could hit, or a spot in Alabama how do we get to South Carolina? You know what I mean?
And especially when you're driving, you're like, well, how far of a drive can we make and still have energy to perform?
Yeah.
Which is a big difference in my 40s versus my 20s, right? But I'm willing to drive 7 hours and still play a show. We live in Texas. 7 hours is not very much. Living in Lubbock, it barely gets you past Dallas. So then I kind of look in that area to see what that's going to do for me.
For sure.
All right, let's say you've got the gigs booked, you have your schedule, you have your itinerary, you're preparing to leave, you've got a few weeks, you're rehearsing. How do you know what to take with you?
Well, depending on the event or the venue, I kind of know what I'm going to need, right? If everywhere I'm going supplies a sound, well, I'm just gonna take my instruments, But if I'm going places like where I'm going to play a house concert that doesn't have any sound, well, I'm going to have to take that too. So before I ever even prepare to leave, I've had those questions answered immediately when I book what I'm doing. So your answer is known right away.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when we started out, we were carrying our own PA and we thought that was cool. Eventually, I didn't think it was cool to carry heavy objects anymore, than my amp and all of that stuff. So we would start putting a rider together and start going, okay, well, if you're booking us, here's what we require. But we were also at, we had graduated to that level where we could demand that, and it's interesting because sometimes those gigs you made a lot of money. Sometimes those gigs you didn't make any money. Sometimes you can make way more money at a house show that you had to carry your PA on than you can at a bar, like insanely more, So, but yeah, you kind of get a sixth sense for it. I love the idea of controlling your gear. I especially love the idea of controlling your monitor system because that's how you hear. And so a lot of bands nowadays and a lot of artists are carrying in-ear monitor rigs so that they can literally just take a feed off the house console or off of the snake, off of the splitter snake.
Or maybe their own digital console that they have on stage with them.
Correct.
I've seen that a few times.
They do that all the time. And then that way they at least have the consistency of that. So
Interesting. Okay. If you had your druthers, would you fly or drive?
That's a difficult question. At this point, I would depend on the show and what they had to offer. And I don't even mean financially because I just performed in Croatia and couldn't get my guitar over there. I was just sponsored by Breedlove Guitars in Oregon and had a terrible time getting my guitar to Lubbock. So I can only imagine that if I were having to take my own equipment other than a guitar, how terrible that would be. And then you want to take merch and you want to take all of that. So for convenience sake, I would absolutely love to fly. But as much as flying costs and as much as $50 for every extra bag that you have to take, I would almost rather drive and have some gigs in the middle.
Yeah, we've done both. We used to have a motorhome and we would pack everybody in that, throw a trailer on the back and carry all the stuff. When we did kind of start doing fly dates, I loved that. That was great. But you also have to be a pretty high caliber musician to be able to achieve that because you're invariably going to get there and you've asked for a late 60s super reverb and you get a 2022 PV Bandit and you're like, and so you sometimes have to deal with what you get in that regard. And technology has changed a lot, with the modeling amps and stuff that people are using nowadays. But I'm kind of old school. I like the old loud things, So there's a penalty either way. One, you spend a lot of time in a van, and the other way, you don't get what you want.
Yeah. But if you're driving, you can stop and see the sights.
Oh, and I love that. Like, so touring for me is, I love to go play shows, but I love even more than that the adventure. Like, I love seeing all the sights. I love eating all the different kinds of food. And as someone who just really adores traveling, music is kind of a way to let me do the thing I love most, which is actually traveling. And I want to see the whole entire world. And music, luckily, can make that possible if you can do it the right way.
Okay. So you've got it booked. How do you prep? How do you make sure you're ready? I mean, you're ready to book a tour. You're ready to be a touring musician. How do you make sure you're ready that when you get in the car or on that plane, that you're in the best shape you can be for the tour?
I don't know that I have an answer for that because I feel like I'm always ready. So
Yeah,
I don't
Jenni spends her
I
you're
don't
always
do any
playing gigs,
prepping.
She's always touring. Yeah.
Like, what do you mean prepping? I get up and I get in the car. So maybe you have a better answer for that.
No, I actually think that that's a really astute observation, Jenni, is that you have defined and designed your life in order to do this, that you have designed your life based around being a musician and touring and playing music that you love. And I think that that's what you have to do. I think there's some practical things that you can do. For instance, I used to always have a bag packed. 24/7. It didn't matter when. When we got home, we washed the clothes. I put them back in the bag, and it went in the closet. And the next Wednesday, when we had to go climb in the van again, or the motorhome, or on a plane or whatever, I just pulled the bag out.
Do you carry an iron with you? 'Cause
I did
they
not.
must have been wrinkled
Yeah,
after spending a week in
They
the
were
bag.
totally wrinkled, but I'm a boy. I mean, I'm show dressed right now. So I played rock and roll.
The thing is, I am too,
Yeah,
truthfully.
Exactly. I played rock and roll, and we can kind of get away with murder there. But I do think that you kind of design your life for that. I do think when you do start to go on the road, this is a little aside, I do think you have to be better than, say, the average bar band or the average singer-songwriter who plays at a restaurant for 3 hours a night or whatever. I think you have to prepare a show. I think you have to practice speaking to an audience enough to know how to communicate with them in the moment. Eventually that becomes very natural. But I remember in the beginning, it was like, I'm going to write this down on a 3x5 card. And I'm not going to look at it at the show, but I am looking at it on the way there going, oh yeah, I'm introducing that song. What am I going to say?
I can tell this cool story, right? That's something I guess that's I'm glad you brought that up because that is something I do when I prepare a set list. I always go, well, man, this would be a really cool story to tell between these songs, or maybe I can talk about this little thing like that. So that is really good. Yeah, thank you for saying that.
I think shows don't fall apart while you're playing. They fall apart in the transitions. That's where people get bored.
Oh, really?
Is because nothing's worse than everybody's doing their thing, they're rocking out, having a great time, and then they stop and go, hey, what do you want to play next?
Oh, yeah.
That's just,
When
don't
people,
go on the road like that.
Yeah, when people turn around to talk about what they're going to play next, that does drive me
it drives me crazy.
I'm like, you should know what you're going to play next.
Yeah.
Don't you have a set list written?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're with a band, and you have a set list. You're getting ready to go on the road. Do you practice Do you practice the set in sequence, and do you practice how you transition and whether or not you stop and talk?
I have gone both ways before. One of the things that I try to do, and it's easier when I'm by myself, I try to read the audience, and sometimes your set list isn't what they're looking for. So you have to be able to make adjustments on the fly. And if you can do that, I think you can come up with, your little jokes. I tell terrible jokes, and it's kind of my thing, right? I'm always like, my motto is good music, bad jokes. So you come to a Jenni Dale Lord show, I always say, come for the music, leave because the jokes. Everybody laughs. That's why you're like, are we going to laugh in this interview? It's like, we better. I don't know how not to laugh. But with my band, it's a little more rigid, mainly because I want them to know what's coming up next. But I can't say that I've never been like, all right, you guys, I'm calling audibles. Are you ready? Here we go. So I try to be fluid and read the audience as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. And I do think that as you become a seasoned player and seasoned musician and seasoned traveler, you get to the point where you can read an audience, and that audible call, you have a gut thing that goes, yeah, we don't need to do a slow song here. Okay, guys, skip to this one. You know what I mean? And the band will do it. When I was young and we first started doing this, I was real systemic about it. What we did is we had 3 types of rehearsals. We had what was called a creative rehearsal, which means who cares how you play, who cares what happens. We're just trying to write new stuff, come up with ideas, and you usually play terrible during those, but that's where new songs come from. And then we would do repertoire rehearsals, which is we're practicing these notes and let's get our parts right. And then we would do performance rehearsals, and we would do the show. We would practice speaking. At that time, our lead singer and I did most of the speaking, and I'm relatively natural at that. He grew to be very natural at it, but wasn't initially. So he really needed a lot of practice to get there. And the practice didn't hurt me either. As a matter of fact, we used to, on our rehearsal hall wall, we took butcher paper, big rolls of butcher paper, and covered an entire wall and drew people on it with eyeballs, so that I would remember that this is how humans communicate,
Right.
is with eyes.
Right.
You look at people. And that's a really hard thing to do as a musician, because you're afraid, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to overcome that. So I think you can prep for that and become comfortable in where it's automatic for you. But you should still prepare a little.
To that end, when you've done your 3 kinds of rehearsals, that's a great way to explain that. Are you listening, folks? Great ideas here. Hope you're taking notes. There'll be a test later. When you feel like you're ready in your rehearsal space, then do you go find a guinea pig audience and put it on them before you're on the road?
Oh, 100%. As a matter of fact, one of the most successful bands I was in, which was called 100 Love Sonnets, named after Pablo Neruda poetry book. The thing that we did is we built a set, and then we did a house concert and chose 20 people that we knew were influential in our community, and had them over to the house and played the show for them.
Wow.
And 2 weeks later, we had our first show booked, and 300 people showed up.
Wow.
So that was an eye-opener for me, is to go, yeah, practice this, but you can also, that can be a part of a way that you can build an audience. Now, we had come out of other bands, and so there was kind of some knowledge as to what might happen, so it wasn't just, 20 people and all of a sudden we were successful. But it was, we would do that and then test it locally, and then go out on the road. And hopefully you're playing locally. You have to own your hometown. You got to own that.
What about contracts? Do you do contracts?
I do sometimes. Scott definitely has a lot more history with contracts than I do. But basically, I think it just depends on the gig that I've got going on. So if it's a big event, usually people want a contract, mostly to make sure that you're going to show up, because they're investing lots of time and money on you. But at the same time, it's good to have it on the reverse, because you don't want to show up and be like, I did all of this. But I'm pretty lax when it comes to contracts. A lot of the shows that I play are, your traditional venues or house concerts or things like that, that it's not really that serious. But anytime, like I said, it's a big event, like the thing I did in Nebraska, we had contracts, we had all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Here in Texas, we operate on a handshake a lot, and I even on a pretty high level, we operate on a handshake. Some of the big records I make, it's just phone call, do you agree? Yeah, sounds great, and we're off to the races. I do find that contracts, the reason you do a contract is because then both of you remember what was said in that phone conversation. And I remember when I realized the value of it. We were out touring. I think that was in the Reagan administration. That was one of our bands. We all wore suits and were different members.
I thought he put us in the 80s really quickly.
Yeah.
I was like, the Reagan administration.
Yeah. I was the Secretary of Energy. Imagine that. We were playing this huge frat party. And we're playing at their fraternity house in Austin. And we literally pull up, we start unloading the gear, and the guy runs up and he goes, oh, hey, dude, man, I'm really sorry, but we don't have enough money to pay for our beer delivery, so we can't pay you the full amount. And I just turned around and I said, hey, guys, pack it up. And I said, if you'll read in the contract, you're going to pay us in full right now. And he, oh, no, wait. We got paid in full and we did the show. I had a contract.
Yeah.
So, and it was, yeah,
Yeah. Well, contracts are a pain until you need one.
Well,
right?
and
Until there's a problem.
if I may add, one good thing about technology today is a lot of things. I do forget things. People forget things. Even
Sure.
without a contract, I try to do every negotiation through an email or a text message. If not because necessarily I don't even trust them, it's because I don't trust my own memory.
Yeah.
So as long as I have something I can go back to and read, it may not be a signed contract, but at least you have proof that says this is
Yes.
what we agreed upon, and you should live up to your end of the bargain.
And in many states, if it's in writing, even electronic writing, it's binding. And
Yeah,
Texas
that's correct.
is one of those
Yes.
states. Yeah. And so one of the names for that is a deal memo. You just put the pertinent information in there without having a long contract. What do you think are the top 3 benefits of touring?
Top 3. Well, if you like adventure, for me, that's, as I said, the number one. But I think, just going out and expanding your audience. If your ultimate goal is to make a big name for yourself, you're not going to do that playing locally. You're just not going to. You have to grow your fan base. You have to get out there and do all of that stuff. So if that's a goal of yours, I mean, that's a huge benefit if you can achieve that. And just making connections and friendships. I say all the time, the best thing you can do, no matter where you are in this business or in life, is make friends, because ultimately those relationships are going to benefit you in so many ways. Emotionally, it's not just all about what can you do for me. Relationships are the backbone of everything, I think.
I think, we made it a real point that whenever we would play, we really wanted to get to know the people who would listen to us, and so after the set, I'd go sit down at a table and just introduce myself and meet people and just, and it never failed that some of those people are still my friends now. And that was 20 years ago, and it also never failed how many times that would be, we'd let somebody know, hey, we're playing in Midland. They go, hey, dude, you can come, we got a spare bedroom. You can come crash with us. And I mean, there was $120 we didn't have to spend that night on a hotel, and so, yeah, I'm going to agree with that. I think it's mainly the relationships, and you build really, really great friends. You meet other bands that you can help in your region, and they can help you in theirs. And I just think that's really important.
And so we mentioned email, and I'm thinking, I started long before the internet. I was actually booking a band when the World Wide Web happened. And, it took about a year to be able to have a website. But I remember in 1992 looking at the first web page that ever went up. Promotional materials are a lot easier now, and communications are a lot easier now. What about promotion? I mean, before you leave, you're going to do everything you can to support the promoters. You're going to take your merch. But what about once you're on the road? Do you use the internet, social media to keep promoting while you're heading towards the next venue?
I do. I'm promoting pretty much from the minute I wake up till the minute I go to bed. And especially, I work a lot, so I'm promoting many different things. And one thing I've noticed, we as a society, our memory is short these days. So you kind of have to keep at it, just to be, hey, my album release party's next week. Hey, my album release party's next week. Scott Faris is going to be there. My album release party's next week. So you just really have to keep at people just to keep it fresh in their mind. So yes, if that's what you're trying to do, you really can't stop. This business is 24/7. I even dream about this stuff. It's like, it's crazy.
And there's lots of distractions for folks, right?
Oh, it's all distraction.
Yes.
I think Jenny's right. I think you have to be promoting continually. Even the national folks that I work with, they're constantly putting out a video going, hey, Little Rock, we're there on Friday night. Tickets are available we've got a low ticket warning in Fayetteville. You know what I mean? And so if you want to come to the show, we'd love to see you there and all of that. And so, I think it's a 24/7 job.
And I think one thing I strive to do is to promote differently. Like, instead of sharing the same poster 25 times a day, I may talk about the same venue or the same show, but I try to give you a different way of seeing it. You mentioned the video, so you could do like a little video or make a different looking poster. Or right now I'm doing artist spotlights, to kind of promote the people that are going to be there. So I'm still promoting the same event, but I'm trying to do it differently. That way people aren't like, I've seen that poster 85 times. I don't know if that really matters, but in my
Yeah.
brain, I'd be like, okay, I get it already.
Well, when I was teaching, I used to teach at South Plains College, and I taught a class called Performance and Promotion, and it was how to be a musician on a guerrilla level. And at that time, and I left there in 2007, it used to be the human attention span. Like on TV, you would see like 15 changes a second, okay, originally. And that was, the camera changed, somebody walked through, somebody said something, all of that. And 15 in a second, you think that's a lot. Well, and then MTV happened, it turned into 120. And you're just like, oh my gosh. And then if you think about the number of impressions you have to get in your brain before something sticks. I can look in this room and there's probably 300 instances of marketing in this room right now that I could identify. And we ignore it all. And so we have to find a way to get above that noise floor. So I think you're right, the creative way you're doing it. And then leveraging, people, you do a lot of your songwriter series where you're working with other songwriters and you promote them on your social media and they promote you, anything that you can do to cross-pollinate with somebody who has a fan base that you don't have, I think is super important.
What about budget? Do you do a budget? And if you do, how do you do it?
You want to start this one?
I'm a moron. No.
I second that.
No
About
budget.
me, though,
Let's
not
go on
him.
the
About
road.
me.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, new question.
No. So,
What advice would you give?
so that's the thing. I think ultimately you have to decide how much you're willing to risk, right? How much you're willing to lose. If playing the Kansas State Fair is a really cool opportunity, but it's not even going to cover your hotel room, but it's getting you to Nebraska, is that something worth doing? In my opinion, it is. It just depends on what your ultimate goal is. If your ultimate goal is to make money, stay home, play every venue in your hometown, you don't have any expenses, your gas is down, so it's really just what you're willing to lose, because you are going to lose sometimes, but sometimes you're going to win.
That's exactly right. I'm an odd duck. I'm both a producer and musician and a visual artist. And when I was studying visual art, my first art professor walked in and first question he asked, all right, how many of you want to be millionaires? And I wasn't super bright, but I knew that's a trick question. Don't raise your hand. And of course, the hands all shut up. And he said, great, go study banking. There's the door. Because if you love money, this isn't the place for it. You might make a living, but you ain't going to get rich. And so, but if you can't live without playing music, or you can't live without painting, or you can't, then welcome to the family, you're in the right place. And I thought that stuck with me forever. So yeah, I'm pretty stupid when it comes to money. I'm not bright that way, but I have a sixth sense about, hey, we have this anchor gig. We know we're going to make this much here. I think, we were really good at selling merch. We carried a Walmart, and we were really good at meeting people. And when you meet people, they generally buy more shirts and stuff when you're nice. Imagine that. So, and you do kind of got to be a salesman for that kind of thing. You got to sell your albums and, talk that stuff up. And so, I could figure it out. There are people who are way smarter than me, and you should probably ask them that, because I'm not so bright that way.
But he's not a moron.
No. So merch for touring, is merch a must?
100%.
We would make anywhere from $350 to $1,000 a night extra in merch as a small touring entity. You are crazy if you're not doing that. And don't just think one shirt, you need 4 or 5. And don't just think one album, you need you need as much stuff as you can carry. And the big bands, a lot of times they've got a separate merch trailer that's carrying that stuff.
And what about CDs?
You want to address that?
I still make CDs. I realize that they're not as popular as they used to be. I still sell CDs, and we're making vinyl for this next record, and I've heard that cassette tapes are making a resurgence. So I do believe that ultimately what's not cool now will be cool again, because that is what happens. And having a physical product for me just means so much more. Like, one thing Scott and I really focus on outside of the music is we love artwork. You can't do that on digital music. And then you will never convince me that an MP3 sounds better than a CD format or a vinyl format. It doesn't. For me, it doesn't sound near as good. So until my dying breath, I will continue to make CDs.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo that. Number one, from a audio guy who does it for a living, yeah, MP3s do not sound as good. Okay. But I firmly believe that product gives people something they can take home and something that they can sign. Now, it used to be we would order 1,000 CDs minimum. So now maybe you're ordering 500, or maybe you're ordering 300 or 100. I still think you want that. And last year, for the first time in, I want to say, I don't remember how many years, but over a decade, CDs outsold digital downloads. So, and vinyl has experienced an enormous resurgence. As a matter of fact, all of the pressing plants are adding capacity. And so music is back, and I think there is a thing that people want to take a piece of you home. They see something they like, and they love that moment, and they want to take a piece of that experience home. And if you don't have it, they can't.
So I remember making a transition in my career from playing local clubs to first playing a very large free concert. So all of a sudden going from maybe 100 people max to tens of thousands. And then going and playing medium-sized and small venues on the road, new communities, and then eventually working up and playing festivals where I had those big crowds again. So at each of those transition points, the music sounded and felt different to me each time. I bet you guys can talk about that. Like when you get out of town and it's new people, and then when something changes in terms of the size of the venue.
I mean, absolutely. No, go ahead.
No, start.
No, please. No, I'm making an agreement. You.
Yeah, no, I do think that's true. And I think that one of the things that I find, especially with younger musicians, myself included, growing up, playing and stuff, is that I had more fear when I was in front of 3,000 people or 6,000 people or something when I started than when I was in front of 60. Wrong. Man, there's safety in numbers, dude. The more people there, the more. If 50% of 3,000 people like you, they can make a lot of noise. If 50% of 60 people like you, they might be quiet as a mouse. And so to me, that larger audience, I really enjoyed. Although I have to admit, I really, as a young person, always wanted to do those big, the stadium thing, all the fancy lights, all the things. And then it really became more about the intimacy of it to me. I mean, I really love, I love that 300 to 500, maybe 750, 800 range of audiences, because there's just they're in it, they can go crazy, all that stuff, but they're also close enough that they can see the sweat drop off your nose.
Right.
And that means something to me.
It's big enough to feel big, but it's not like trying to push an iceberg.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, 100%.
And I agree with you, and I'm going to kind of put it from an audience perspective as well, because I just played the Lubbock Live Music Festival a few weeks ago, and it was a really big stage, like exactly the kind of stage you would see. Really, Roger Krager was a headliner, so it was a really big stage, the kind of stage you always dream of playing. And I actually had a guy come up to me who's been following me since the beginning of my career, and he's like, I've always been the biggest fan of yours, but to see you on that big stage with a big sound, and oh my God, I feel like you finally made it. So there's a sense that, yes, you feel like you've made it when you're on that big stage as well. well. I do agree that the smaller audiences are the hardest ones, because you've got them right there, or the house concert situation where
20 people.
you can touch them.
Yeah,
like
yeah, literally.
And then the anxiety is really on. But I think it's just really cool when you do get to finally be on those big stages that maybe as a little kid that you've always dreamt about being on. You finally maybe feel like a little bit more of a sense of accomplishment, which is really gratifying. And then I think your followers maybe see you a little bit differently as well. Like I'm still waiting for the day when my family goes, "Oh, you're not just my daughter, you're not just my sister," like because I don't think I can be on the biggest stage in the world. I don't think they'll ever see me differently, or maybe they will. So I got to get there.
Yeah.
I got to get there. So I think it goes both ways.
So the energy is really different when the crowd is bigger, right?
Yeah.
It feels different.
Yeah.
Your fingers work different.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's something to prepare for your big audience. Maybe here just to finish up, do you have a favorite anecdote from your touring experience you'd like to share?
Scott?
Well, I thought about this early, and I am a person with a lot of stories, but I'll actually show you guys, and I'll share a photo with our videographer as well. This is my favorite memory from the road. We were in the motorhome, and we were broken down in Alabama, touring with a 3-year-old. And just sometimes those horrible moments when the air conditioner's out in the motorhome and you're broken down on the side of the road, that's horrible in the moment. And then years later, you're like, man, we did that. That was really cool. So there you go.
Okay.
I don't know. It's so funny every time I get this sort of question. And something happens in the moment. I'm like, oh, I gotta remember that for the next time I'm asked one of these questions. And then I finally get asked the question, and I'm like, dang, I don't remember what I was gonna say. But I did have a similar story where the band we were playing in El Paso for Music Under the Stars is what it was called. It was in their Chamizal National Park, and the only way you could get up to the stage was like almost this like ramp that you were supposed to drive your van up, and for some reason my bass player backed it up the whole way and ended up like blowing the transmission. And I was like, oh, I forgot about that till you told the story. And so then we were stuck in El Paso. But on a more personal note, like one of my favorite moments is I went on tour all the way up to Montreal, Canada in 2018. And my favorite show I've ever had on the road was in a town called Norwood, Massachusetts. And it was called the Fallout Shelter. And it was like a old school, like nuclear war fallout shelter. And it was all broadcast live on YouTube. And it was a house concert situation, but it wasn't in a house. It was in a venue. And my dad had just passed away. And so I thought I was going to share the song that I wrote for him that's on the Free Whiskey album. And I pride myself on making very few mistakes. But I totally bombed like the beginning of that song. And I just stopped the middle of the show, which I never do. And I was just like, I am so sorry. I cannot start the song this way. I really have to just do it right for my dad. And I was humiliated, and I thought I was never going to live up to it. But the feedback that I got from people watching all the way back here at home was so positive, and like, oh, the humanity with that song, and like all this stuff like that. It just it took my worst moment and turned it into a story that I'm now willing to tell you in front of everybody.
Wow.
So it was really weird, but cool.
That's great. Would you mind if I shared one?
I would love
Please
it.
do.
Okay, I'm going to give a beat here because you might want to cut this out. So it's my first major. I was never a major tour, but it was a major for us. We were gone for about 2 months, touring the East Coast in the winter of 1988. And we were everywhere from, I think, South Carolina to almost the Canadian border, Burlington, Vermont. And we showed up for a gig in Burlington, Vermont. So there had been a particularly disheartening show and an enervating party afterwards that went way too late. We were up way too early, getting in the van, all of us, all 6 of us, to go to the next show, and we pulled off at a McDonald's. We were going to go inside, and a busload of kids got in front of us, like, oh, we're not going to wait for that. So we got in the drive-thru, and it was one of those drive-thrus that once you're committed, you're trapped. And so you pull up, and we're almost ready to give our orders, and there was a little grotto on the side with the Hamburglar and Ronald McDonald. And our piper, this is a folk band, we had a piper, right? I'm driving, he's riding shotgun. We pull up, I make our order. People who were complaining were coming back and standing between us and the window to yell at them. It was a really pleasant morning. And so finally our piper reaches into, now he didn't take time for a shower, but he did change his personals, right? So he reaches in and grabs the underwear that he had been wearing the previous day, and he flings it. And Ronald McDonald was waving, and it sticks on his hand, right? It's hanging there. And we're like, we cannot believe you did that. And we're looking around, who's going to arrest us? Nobody noticed. So we left. A week later, we were going back up or down the New Jersey Turnpike. I saw that McDonald's. I swung off, and it was still there a week later.
Oh, my gosh. That's terrible.
That's so good.
You may want to cut that.
I don't. That's the best
I think
part
it's
of
great.
the whole interview.
We actually got in trouble one time because our lead singer, we were playing at Six Flags in the Batman theater. We were supposed to be on the big stage. They had booked us, and then some Dallas ISD booked cheerleading tryouts on the big stage at the same time, and the two didn't talk, so they put us in the Batman theater. That was a little demoralizing, but it was really cool because our lead singer busted through the wall that the car drives through. We got in a lot of trouble for that.
That is cool. That is cool.
That's too funny. See, and I'm boring compared to you guys. I haven't never gotten in any trouble. We're so good.
Okay, before we sign off here, you got any news? What's happening?
Jenny's
in
the
your
one
world?
with the big news.
Well, you're a big part of it. Yeah, Scott and I just finished making our 6th album together, called A Million Moments, and Scott gave me the best compliment that I've ever gotten in my life, at least from him. Is the best work that either he or I have ever done.
It's the best record I've ever been a part of. It's absolutely incredible. Jenny's songwriting on it is unparalleled. She's at the top of her game. Her vocals are stunning. The musicianship was incredible. The arrangements. I mean, I think we always joke about how are we going to top this when you finish a record, and sometimes you do, and then there's the other times. This one we did it. It's really good.
So we have our work cut out for us for the next one.
Yeah, that's right.
sure.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that quite yet.
We just finished it like a week ago.
Yeah,
so
literally.
We're just now, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jenny Dale Lord, you're on socials. You're on
Yep.
Facebook.
Everything.
Everything.
Jenny Dale Lord. Jenny with an I.
Jenny with an I.
Yeah.
And Scott, Amusement Park.
Amusement Park Studio, Instagram, Facebook. I haven't done the TikTok thing. I don't have time for that.
Man, I can't. The video thing in general. I don't want to have to put on makeup every day. It took everything I had to put on makeup for this interview.
Me too.
Yeah. You look amazing, by the way. And
Well,
so
I
do
did my
you.
makeup today. I'm totally
That's
kidding.
good.
Well, thank you both so much. I want to say
Thank
thank you to the Lubbock Cultural Arts Foundation. They're on all the socials, and this and other events that are videotaped will be on their YouTube channel. Also, follow them in socials so that you know which events are coming up. There's live workshops, performance, and other events coming up throughout the year. So thanks very much.
Where I'm supposed to be.